Hello, everyone. Hi there. I know some people are connecting to audio, so I will let you all join us in the room. We would love for those of you as you join in, if you could let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat. Please let us know. Add in here. We would love to engage you through there. And that's where, of course, you'll be able to ask us any questions as we go through this session. But I don't want to delay too much. I'll jump right in. So my name's Gabrielle Oates, and I'm here representing the Educating All Learners Alliance, or ELA, EALA. And today we're discussing distance learning and some new data and the challenges and strategies it's revealed to reach students who's learned differently. So we're excited to partner with Understood and NCLD on this to deliver you some of that feedback. Hello to all of you in the chat in St. Paul, Ontario, Philly, Georgia. Welcome, everybody. We're happy to have you join us. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. I did want to give you all a little bit of insight into what the Educating All Learners Alliance is, if you don't already know. So we're happy to have both Understood and CLD as partners, but essentially, as the COVID-19 pandemic started, we saw there was a gap in the space of special education services that would be provided to students both with remote, distance learning, as well as hybrid learning in all those different forms. So 6 founding organizations that you'll see on the screen here came together to create this alliance. So we have since developed a resource library on the educatingalllearners.org website that we continually vet and share resources in that all support best practices for special education practitioners, families, and students. And so we're happy to share with you today. And so in addition to those resources that we create, we also have other versions of resources, which are webinars like these that we do record and share afterwards. So if that was a question, don't worry, we will be sharing. But for today, I know we want to particularly talk about the data from related to distance learning. So we are really happy to have Megan Whitaker from NCLD and Trinia Kaufman from Understood join us. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to them.
Thanks so much, Gabrielle. Hi, everyone. Great to be with you today. I'm Megan Whitaker, the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. We are a national nonprofit working to improve the lives of the 1 in 5 children with learning and attention issues and their families. And I'm happy to be joined today by Trinia and the great partnership that we've had working on this distance learning toolkit. And today we're sharing data and research both on the challenges in serving students who learn differently, as well as the strategies that we know can work. So we'll explore a new resource created by NCLD and Understood to help educators reach and teach the 1 in 5 during distance learning. And to start, we'll explore some of the foundational research that has shaped the resource we've created and the challenges that we've seen since the onset of the pandemic. So you heard me say the 1 in 5 with learning and attention issues. When we say that, we're talking about students who struggle due to brain-based differences. They can have identified or unidentified challenges in school. They may have an IEP or a 504 plan, or they may not. And their challenges are in the areas of reading, math, writing, organization, focus, processing, and more. And even before COVID-19 began, our system was not serving these students well. It has never really been set up in a way that actually ensures that every student has what they need to succeed. And there are lots of data that we can point to across a number of indicators, but here you can see our NAEP scores. So a recent administration of the National Assessment of Educational Progress found that more than 96% of students with learning disabilities were actually below proficient on reading and math. And that data point alone is hugely problematic, considering that virtually all students with learning disabilities are not doing as well as we know that they can. But it doesn't stop there. We've also seen a ripple effect into other areas. When we don't effectively reach and teach these students, the problems multiply, and we can see from their outcomes that a whole lot more needs to be done to support them. Students with learning disabilities are 3 times as likely to drop out as students without disabilities at a rate of about 18%. They also enroll in college at a much lower rate than their peers. And of those who enter any post-secondary program, only 41% will actually graduate from it. They're twice as likely to be unemployed. About 50% of them will not have a job after high school. And as many as half will be involved in the justice system within 8 years of leaving high school. And this is just for those who have been identified as having a learning disability. So we know that there are many more students that we're losing to similar outcomes because we never really figured out how to effectively reach and teach those students and provide the right supports. But the reality is, and research has proven time and again, that these statistics don't have to be the reality for students with learning and attention issues. And part of what holds students back are the expectations we set for them and the mindsets we hold about what they can achieve. So we're going to debunk some of the long-held beliefs and myths and misperceptions that can be contributing to how our students are served or not served by our current system. So first, if you've heard any of the following, that learning and attention issues are caused by poor parenting, that they are the result of laziness, or that they can be outgrown, these are all myths about learning and attention issues. We know that 1 in 4 educators believe that learning and attention issues can be outgrown. We know that 1 in 3 educators view learning and attention issues as laziness, and 1 in 4 believe that ADHD is the result of bad parenting. But the fact is, learning and attention issues are brain-based disorders that are caused by differences in the function and structure of individuals' brains. They are inherent in how brains function and how they're wired. And so while there may be some genetic influence on brain development, there's no single thing that we can point to as the root cause of a learning or attention issue. And because they're brain-based, they persist throughout the lifespan, and they're not going to be outgrown with time. And that's really important to understand about learning and attention issues. And the second myth is one that is pervasive across our education system and our society, and that's that students with learning and attention issues can't achieve at the same levels as their peers without disabilities. And we've seen through surveys of educators some trends that demonstrate this persistent mindset. We've done research with Understood that has shown that 90% of teachers feel that inclusion benefits students with disabilities, but that means that there's still 10% who don't believe that inclusion benefits students with disabilities. The number then drops drastically when we ask teachers if they believe that inclusion benefits other students, so if it benefits students without disabilities. And it drops even further when you ask whether inclusion benefits teachers. And only 50% of teachers feel that inclusion benefits them as a teacher serving these students. And perhaps most importantly on this slide is that 50% of teachers believe that students with mild learning disabilities are capable of reaching grade level standards. So half of the teachers educating these students don't actually think that they can achieve grade level standards. And to be very clear, students with learning and attention issues, by definition, and to be eligible for special education under federal law, must have an average or above average IQ. And so in addition to years of research that have shown that 85% of students with any disability can achieve at grade level standards, we still see these beliefs suggesting that students can't do that. But research has proven it, students have demonstrated it, and mindsets are still taking a while to catch up. And so a few years ago, NCLD and Understood conducted research to better understand educator mindsets and confidence levels in teaching students with learning and attention issues. And what we found through a survey of more than 1,300 public school teachers was that many of them felt unprepared to teach the 1 in 5. Only 17% said they felt very prepared to teach these students. And they don't feel confident in their ability to do so. So only 30% of them actually felt that they could effectively support the 1 in 5 when they were doing their absolute best. But they want to do better and they want to support their students. So what works? What strategies can actually help educators teach these students with learning and attention issues? And what strategies can actually help support all kids? And based on empirical research that's been done across the field, we've looked across all of it and identified 3 mindsets that are critical to educator success when teaching the 1 in 5. These include a positive orientation toward inclusion, a strong sense of self-efficacy, and a growth mindset. Teachers essentially need to believe that students can and should be learning alongside their peers without learning disabilities. Teachers need to believe that they actually can teach students in that inclusive setting. And they need to believe that students can grow and that teachers themselves can also improve through practice and hard work. All of these mindsets are critical to actually cultivating an experience for both students and teachers that suggests that they all can be successful and grow over time. And on top of that, the literature also revealed a set of 8 practices that demonstrate strong evidence for success. These may happen at different grain sizes in different ways throughout a classroom or a school. You can see some of them here include explicit instruction, universal design for learning, positive behavior strategies. And so at the same time, we know that doing these things and implementing these strategies will look different across the classroom than it might in a virtual setting. These are things that really can benefit all learners and not just the 1 in 5, but are really essential to using evidence-based practices in a school setting. So when COVID affected schools, a lot changed because those 8 practices and those mindsets can be hard enough to tackle in a regular in-person learning environment. And then COVID happened and a lot of things changed within schools. You think about the pre-existing barriers and challenges that we were already seeing in our schools. And now we expected educators to pivot overnight and adapt to virtual and remote learning. And so we've seen a whole lot of new challenges facing educators during this time. So we hosted a focus group of educators earlier this year, and we heard a lot of important things about the challenges that they've been facing. Of course, students have been disconnected from many of the in-person special education services and supports that they had been receiving. Many educators told us that the professional development they've been offered has been minimal and that there wasn't a lot of guidance about how to effectively instruct students in a virtual world. They were struggling with maintaining student engagement and measuring that over time. And like everyone, really struggling with the social and emotional impacts of the pandemic, not just for their students, but for themselves as teachers. And they were figuring out how to differentiate instruction and apply what they knew in this virtual setting for an entire classroom. They felt that there wasn't a ton of guidance from principals and administrators during this time about how to do these things well. They questioned whether there was sufficient feedback and coaching to help them along during this time. And they really had to lean into family engagement to make sure that they were supporting their students and collaborating with families during this new environment. And that's a lot of new challenges that they presented us with. And that's just from one focus group that we hosted earlier this year. So we followed up with a survey, and we have some preliminary results that we can share about what educators have found useful and what they're also struggling with during this pandemic. One of the first findings from the survey so far centers on training. We heard that less than half of teachers, and we surveyed about 2,000, less than half received training on supporting students with learning and attention issues this year, and only half of those found the training that they've received to even be helpful. And most teachers are actually turning to each other. They're turning to other teachers to find resources to help them through the year, looking for strategies and support to help their students with learning and attention issues. We also heard that the challenges can be particularly compounded for teachers who are teaching in high poverty schools or districts. Teachers there said more often that they felt burnt out, that they feel there's not enough time to teach everything that they're expected to teach. And they felt like they needed more support from their school or district to support students with learning or attention issues. And they were also less likely to have found their trainings to be helpful this year. So this is really important when we think about the kinds of resources and supports that are needed in schools, not just for teachers who serve those with learning and attention issues, but also those who serve students with multiple identities, including those from low-income backgrounds. And finally, we saw a difference, which not surprisingly to most of us probably, based on the type of learning environment that the teachers were teaching in. Teachers who were primarily teaching in in-person settings had a much more positive experience in terms of student engagement, attendance, and student progress toward goals and standards. They felt like their students were, on track and making progress toward those goals. But on the flip side, it meant that teachers who were operating in primarily distance learning settings were having a harder time with engagement, with attendance, and they couldn't say quite as often that their students were making progress toward their goals. So NCLD and Understood recognized this new reality, and we reflected on the research that we've done over the years on mindsets and practices. We know how important those are for educators to be successful in the classroom, and we really wondered how we can help educators apply what we know works in this new and virtual setting. So I will hand it off to Trinia to share more about the toolkit.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Trinia. I'm from Understood. If you haven't visited Understood before, you can find us at understood.org. And we have resources and free information about learning and thinking differences. And we also have resources that are specific for educators. Something just popped up. Oh, let me close that. Okay. So as Megan said, we have done a lot of research over the past couple of years to identify effective practices and key teacher mindsets. And we wanted to revisit that and think about how is this useful to teachers who are in a distance learning environment or a hybrid environment? And what does this mean during this past year with everything that's been going on and all of the challenges that we've been having? So we pulled together a group of researchers and teachers, and we reviewed these practices to see, are they still effective? Do they look different during distance learning? The additional challenges that teachers are having and how these practices might be helpful. And then what are the specific strategies for implementation? What does this look like in this new environment that we're in with these new challenges? So in this toolkit, we revisit the 3 key teacher mindsets in the 8 evidence-based instructional practices. And for each of those, we have a step-by-step how-to section for each practice. And so spoiler alert, we found out that these evidence-based practices are still effective during distance learning and in this new environment, but they do look different. And so we have distance learning tips and strategies to help with that implementation. And we also have from the classroom examples from teachers. So as a former special ed teacher myself, I know it was always helpful when I could actually hear from a teacher, what does this look like in your classroom? How did you actually implement this in real life? And then throughout the toolkit, we also have learning activities that help you find which practices are going to be most helpful for you, depending on what specific challenges you're facing. And of course, it also helps to make it more manageable. And I'm going to show you the toolkit and help you see how we've laid it out, how to navigate it, so that you can hopefully save time in the long run as you're trying to pick out some strategies that might help. And then we also have a special section on assessments and monitoring student progress, since we know that has been a big concern over this past year as well, and will continue to be. These are our lovely Understood teacher fellows who contributed to the toolkit. They gave us the classroom examples, and they also reviewed the toolkit for us to make sure that it was easy to read, easy to implement, and practical for the classroom. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to share my screen and just walk us through this toolkit a little bit. Obviously, there's 8 evidence-based practices that we could cover. Each one of them could be its own training. So we're not going to dive in deep on each of those. But I'm going to show you how you can find the information that you might be looking for whichever of the practices you would like to dive into. So let me go ahead and share screen. Okay, and I'll click over to the toolkit. Okay, so when you open the toolkit, you can see it's a little lengthy. It's 44 pages, but we have laid it out in a way to hopefully make that manageable so you can find the information you're looking for. Oh no. Let me try again. Okay, now are you seeing it? Okay, great. So here we have just our table of contents. So of course, if you know which practice or which mindset you want to look into, if you wanted to learn more about a growth mindset, We have jump links here that you can just click on, and it'll take you straight to that section. And so you can see for each section, we tried to make it really easy to read. So what it is, why it's important, and an application to distance learning. And so this is for the mindsets. And let me scroll up. I want to dive into the practices. And one of the cool features, these double arrows right here that are at the top of every page. If you click on them, it'll take you straight back to the table of contents. So if you're looking for teaching practices that might help address some of the challenges you may be having, you can click on our jump link to the practices. And one of the great things that NCLD and Understood collaborated on is developing these learning activities to help guide you through the practices. So of course, it's not recommended that you try to do all 8 practices and expect yourself to be perfect at everything as you're jumping in. You really want to focus on 1 to 3 practices at a time so that you can dive in a little bit deeper and think about how you're implementing it, and not like any of us, if we focus on too many things, we might get overwhelmed and give up. And so this learning activity here at the beginning can walk you through identifying which practices might be most helpful for you to start with. And so we have the practices listed out here, but then we have this handy chart. And on the left-hand side, you can see this is common challenges we've heard from teachers. So whether that's differentiating instruction, keeping students engaged, meeting social emotional needs. So you can scroll through this list and identify the challenges that are top of mind for you. And then in the top row, we can see the different practices. And of course, X marks the spot where we think the practices are most beneficial for addressing which challenges. And so you can choose which ones you want to focus on first. And if we scroll back up, I just want to show you an example of one of these practices. So if I've gone through the chart and I identified, oh, I think I really need to add some more positive behavior strategies to my toolkit so that I can better support students, then I can click here and it will take me to the section on positive behavior strategies. And so for each of these practices, at the very top, it shows us which challenges we can address with this practice. And then it gives us a very brief overview. What is this? What do we mean by positive behavior strategies? And then a very, hopefully easy to read, immediately actionable ideas for how to do this in your classroom. And of course, these are high-level ideas that give you like the baseline of how to do this in any learning environment, whether you are distance learning, whether you're starting to go back into the classroom environment. So hopefully it's useful as we go forward as well. But if you feel like, oh, I've got this down, I need to dive a little bit deeper, we've also provided some links that will take you to the next level of diving into this practice and these strategies. And then as we scroll down, the next section is application to distance learning. And so this gives very specific ideas for the distance learning environment and how you can implement this practice. And of course, you can click in again if you want more ideas, more in-depth information. And then the last section for each practice is the why it works. So we know for a lot of teachers, understanding what the research says about this, how we know it's effective, what is it actually doing for our students, can make it more clear what we're trying to do with each of these practices. And so that's just a quick overview. I'm going to stop sharing, hopefully. Okay, so that's just a quick overview of the toolkit to show you how to navigate it so that you can dive into the practices that you think will be most beneficial in your environment. I'm going to go forward on here. Oh. And so I know that was a really quick, there was a lot of information that Megan gave, and it was a high-level overview of the toolkit. But I would love to open it up if there's any questions that folks have. I'd also love to hear what challenges you may, and I haven't been following along in the chat if people have been adding this, but what challenges you might be facing with reaching kids who learn differently. And or what resonated from this presentation, what stood out that you think might be helpful to you or to your colleagues. What are your takeaways and what are your questions?
We'll give a few minutes for people to add those in. But I know earlier when you were both discussing particularly you, Megan, the challenges that teachers might face, I know, or not might, have been experiencing. And so one person mentioned the release time, as they called it, for teachers to attend trainings. And so we know that's definitely an important part. I don't know if there's a particular insight you wanted to add there.
Collaboration has especially been hard, finding time where schedules align and you can actually interact with other teachers and colleagues, especially in a virtual or distance learning setting. And we're still digging into some of the findings of the survey that we just collected data on. And there are some findings about, teachers in co-teaching settings seem to be more confident and having a better time supporting students with learning and attention issues. And that may also go toward finding the time as opposed to being, one-on-one with another teacher throughout the day. So we're still trying to understand what kinds of arrangements seem to be working best. But certainly I think, you're not alone in recognizing that time has been a big challenge for educators.
Absolutely. And for anyone else, were you going to add in?
I was just going to add, and I think that's one of the other reasons we decided to make this toolkit directed straight at teachers instead of trying to create it for professional development or for school leaders, which we've done in the past and which is, of course, necessary and helpful. But for this, we really wanted to get it straight to the teachers so that whatever minute of time that you do have, you can access the resource and get some practical ideas, even if your school district isn't providing the support that you need.
Yes, exactly. And also, don't hesitate to advocate. You can use the toolkit to maybe better express to your district or peers what that is that you'll need. So I was going to add in, if somebody's watching the recording of this, we'll make sure that the toolkit is linked below. So please do check it out. I know we provided a brief overview, but there's much more to dive into. So definitely take advantage. And then for those who are participating live, you'll have that linked in the handouts portion of your screen. So definitely be sure to check that out. I think that...
Well, and I just wanted to add, this is one of, I think, several pieces of content and resources that NCLD and Understood will be working together to create as we still, are seeking to understand the extent of the challenges facing educators. And so we're, would love to hear if anyone has thoughts on what is missing, but be sure to stay engaged with ELA because we'll continue to share out new resources going forward as well.
Yes. Absolutely. And so again, if you wanted to follow up with any information from Megan or Trinia, you can go to ncld.org or understood.org and find out more information. We did also want to share where you can stay tuned. We mentioned ELA hosting this, but we do always share resources in our library, including this toolkit. So definitely be sure to check out educatingalllearners.org for more information where you can submit resources, view them, excuse me, watch recordings of these videos, or just be a part of the community. So we would encourage you to do so. And before we go, I do see that there was an additional question added in. So we want to address that. So ways to address mindset and dispel myths. I'm guessing they're referring to maybe that teacher-admin relationship.
I've gotten this question before, where people ask, how do we start changing mindsets? And I think the most important thing is to learn about your students, learn about what learning and attention issues are, learn about what kinds of disabilities students may have and what that actually means about their strengths, their challenges. Every child is going to be different. And if one educator begins to familiarize himself with what that means and sharing that information with others, we'll slowly begin to get the facts out there. Understood has a lot of great resources. NCLD has a publication called The State of Learning Disabilities, which also talks about prevalence and kind of what are these learning and attention issues. And so I just think familiarizing yourself with the research and understanding what students with learning who learn differently are really capable of is the first step, and then sharing that with other educators and encouraging your school leaders and your district leaders to make this part of trainings and professional development for all teachers going forward. These students are in every classroom. They spend most of their day in general education settings. And so it's really important that it's not just special educators who know about these students and what their challenges may be, but also general educators recognizing strengths and challenges at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to add on to that as well. I think, and some of this comes from like my experience when I was teaching, sometimes teachers, and it comes back to that self-efficacy, right? Of like needing to feel like you're capable of teaching these students. And unfortunately, a lot of teachers haven't gotten the training. They don't know what practices are effective for teaching these kids. And so sometimes it's about learning some of these strategies that they can use in their classroom. And then when they see it firsthand, that they've been able to teach a student and then that student is actually able to learn. And that can help, dispel these myths and change their mindset of like, oh, I can do this and these students can do this. It's just about finding the right strategies. And if this strategy didn't work, there's another strategy I can try. And I think learning some of these practices can help change mindsets too.
Absolutely. And we want to thank everybody for engaging in the chat. We definitely agree with a lot of points that are brought up about the importance of cultural awareness, student differences. And so, again, definitely check out the toolkit and hopefully it can support you, or if you're an admin, it can support the staff at your school just to continue to provide best services for students. We know that this will be a continued months of transition. Many of you are back in hybrid or just starting conversations about ways to re-engage students. So we hope that this provides some help in those conversations that you'll be having. And so again, we will share the recording of this, but that does conclude our session for today. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks all.
Thanks so much.